needs. The welcome notice of meeting statement by Commissioner Vicki Thompson.
A news release announcing the date, time, and place of the September 20th, 2018 Commission meeting was distributed September 18th to appropriate media and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs Central Administrative Office, video conference locations, and on the website. The public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistance, or other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested in advance.
Can I have an adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Invocation, which I just saw that I'm doing. I just want to,
Second. The agenda.
so we have a second, all those
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And for the invocation, I just want to thank the Lord that we're all here and that we will do the best that we can do to serve the people we need. And thanks again for all of us. Amen. Introduction of guests. I want to start in the front with Tanya and go to the back.
Hannah Vanderbilt, DDSN.
Ben Orner, DDSN.
Joan Cooper, DDSN.
Ann Ball from DDSN. Catherine Padgett, Family Connection of South Carolina.
Audrey Farrell, DDSN. What the good community absence. Kelly Eckert, DHHS.
Michelle Schaefer, Max Abilities.
Bruce Carter, Executive Budget Office.
Brent Parker, Allendale, Baltimore.
Forward and Warren Babcock Center. Rufus Brett, DDSN.
Jerry Mize, Oconee DSN.
Scott Tanner, DHHS.
Dexter Alston, DDSN.
Good morning, Kevin Jacoby, DDSN.
Daniel Davis, Autism Division.
Stacy Johnson, DDSN. I'm sorry, Rich Knight.
Sean Keith, Sumter County, DSN Board.
Ray Miller, DD Council.
Lindsay, DDSN.
Alfred Davidson, Chester, Lancaster.
I am Dory Tempio from Able, South Carolina.
Mike Moss, Calhoun County Disabilities and Special Needs Board.
Heather Waddell, Tri-Development Center.
Kathleen Worthen, PNA.
Deborah and Heather Person, Richland County.
Pat Melly, DDSN.
Lisa Weeks, DDSN.
Susan Beck, DDSN.
Melissa Ritter, DDSN.
Brian Denny, South Carolina Spinal Cord Injury Association.
Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad to see everybody here, and I'm so glad that we almost completely scathed the storm. I mean, and I want to thank everybody for all the help they did during that time. It's amazing. I'm going to introduce our new Executive Director, Mary Poole, at this time. And just because she got the job in the next week, she had to jump really into action and help us with this hurricane. So I really appreciate that, and it was, I think she did a wonderful job, and I'm glad about that. But I asked Mary for a couple of things I could say about it, so what she sent me last night, I'm going to tell you all about it. Mary has worked in one capacity or another with DDSN program for almost 30 years. For her first job as on the third shift weekends at the Fountain Inn Community Residence in 1989. Y'all, that's when Hurricane Hugo hit. Through her stops at Lawrence, DDSN, back to Greenville, DDSN, and a short stint at Babcock and the Executive Director of Max Abilities in York, I think for around 10 years. 13 years. Mary has maintained that it was her time as a DSP, which has taught her the most about the potential hidden in each of us. She will tell you that getting to know the folks we support has made her a better person, and she is privileged to call so many her friends. Mary is the wife of 40 years to Richard and the mother of 10. And next to having her picture taken, well, she doesn't like me talking about her, but I'm happy to do it. And we're so thrilled to have her. I look forward to a long time as Executive Director here. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, can I have the approval of the minutes of the August 16th, 2018 and August 28th, 18 commission meetings?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, public input. Dory Tempio, did I pronounce it?
Would it be okay, sir, in the front row? Yes. If I come around to you?
Pat, move that chair.
Got it.
Can you move the gym back a little bit? I want
y'all to be able to see me and me to be able to see you. I brought copies for everyone too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning, so nice to have you.
Nice to be here. My name is Dory Tempio, and I am the Director of Community Outreach and Consumer Rights at Able, South Carolina, also known in the community as Able SC. As an individual who proudly has a developmental disability and represents people in the community who also have intellectual, developmental, and other related disabilities, through my work with Able South Carolina and as an individual who lives here in South Carolina, I find it imperative that you reconsider some of these directives. Having lived in a state institution as a child and also spent time in the DDSN system, I respectfully ask that you go back to the core of these issues, the individuals like myself. And I ask you to ask yourself, are we truly taking them into account with some of these directives and providing person-centered, accessible, and inclusive measures that foster independence and self-sufficiency? Able South Carolina is a change agent committed to fostering an inclusive society that empowers individuals with disabilities to live fully engaged and self-directed lives. We challenge stereotypes, protect disability rights, and champion social reform. Able South Carolina is a federally recognized Center for Independent Living, which is a non-residential, community-based, non-for-profit organization that provides individual and systems advocacy to create options and choices for South Carolinians with disabilities to lead independent lives. Able South Carolina is required through the Rehabilitation Act of 1975 to not only be directed, but staffed by professionals with disabilities. This is a point of organizational pride, as the majority of our board of directors have significant disabilities, and over 80% of our staff, like myself, have significant disabilities as well. Core services provided by Able SC include systemic and individual advocacy, peer mentoring, independent living skills training, information and referral services, youth transition services, and institution transition and diversion services. Our services promote self-sufficiency and independence for South Carolinians with disabilities. Our mission is to create greater access and opportunities for independence through empowering individuals with disabilities and promoting community inclusion. As the disability rights slogan says, nothing about us without us, asserts we are bold supporters of the belief that nothing should be done on behalf of people with disabilities without their full input. We would be interested to know, as a group, the extent to which people with disabilities have provided input on these directives to date, and why these individuals are not being given a more full opportunity to comment before a decision is made. Is the mechanism employed in requesting public comment itself actually serving as an impediment to that very input that DDSN needs most? Is the language accessible and understandable in the directives to those in which it impacts? I will tell you, I have read them as a person with a developmental disability. It took me 10 times to understand it. This is serving people. And if they can't understand it, how are they going to come and give you input? How is that person centered? How is that being inclusive? How are we making the community a place where all people have the opportunity to provide input and give their ideas to you? Are there other communication alternatives in place to currently receive that vital input from consumers? Are we thinking about adaptations, accommodations, that those individuals that you would like input from are able to give it? After careful review, Able South Carolina would like to submit the following comments and recommendations regarding the new and revised South Carolina Department of Special Needs directives out for public comments. Taken as a whole, the 5 proposed directives forward a paradigm of assuming incompetence and downplaying the rights of people with disabilities. It is this very sort of rhetoric that is outdated as it is dangerous to the very people DDSN is charged with serving. The provision of disability services in South Carolina exists within a historical context that cannot be ignored. It could be simply summed up by the following. Wherever there is a discussion of protecting the safety and well-being of people with disabilities like myself, there is a tendency to build policy and practice in a way that can undermine the will and rightful authority of the very people it is supposed to serve. Here are some of the chief issues we ask that this body and the South Carolina Department of Disabilities and Special Needs to further consider. The role of reasonable accommodations is notably absent from all 5 directives. Protocols are forwarded that involve things like verbal dialogue and frontline lay professionals making assessments of decision-making capacity without providing safeguards for ensuring that these protocols and assessments fully account for the different ways that people like myself think, engage with concepts, and communicate to others. The other thing we would really like you all to think about, the language around client representatives also really needs to be further examined. It is Able South Carolina's belief, and my own belief as an individual that lives in this state, that while these directives seek to underscore certain South Carolina statutes, there are places where it would appear as though it directly conflicts with others. The South Carolina Adult Health Care Consent Act has very specific procedural safeguards for the finding of incapacity before an agent can assume decision rights over another. The South Carolina Probate Code seeks to encourage the development of maximum self-reliance and independence of the incapacitated person and make appointive as well as other orders only to the extent necessitated by the incapacitated person's mental and adaptive limitations or other conditions warranting this procedure. South Carolina Code 625304. That's okay. Yet, South Carolina Code 442610 and this directive by its reference to that code allow a representative without a finding of incapacity or informed appointment by the individual, which ultimately, at the end of the day, contradicts the presumption of capacity that is the foundation of all individual rights, specifically to those like myself, people with intellectual disabilities, and other related disabilities. I strongly encourage you to go back and re-examine some of this because it could definitely hurt people with disabilities in our communities that want to live independently, self-sufficiently, and participate actively in the community and society, just as I do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Deborah McPherson.
First, I want to thank the staff at the state, regional, and local level who were involved in keeping people with disabilities safe during Hurricane Florence. Second, I attended the House Legislative Oversight Committee on August 30th and obtained a copy of DDSN's recommendations. I and 2 former DDSN commissioners prepared our responses to DDSN's recommendations, and I would like to summarize for you a few of our comments and recommendations this morning. One of the valuable lessons I learned in my first job as a teenager was the importance of listening to your customer and being responsive to their needs. The recommendations presented by DDSN were presented without input from the key stakeholders, the people with disabilities it serves and their families. The Senate Oversight Committee found that advocates have expressed the perception that their input has been routinely ignored by the agency. We supported the Senate recommendation that the General Assembly establish a Disabilities and Special Needs Consumer Advisory Committee with requirements that the members represent the various communities that DDSN serves and specify the roles of this committee in formally providing input into shaping the agency's policy. The band funding system limits waiver participants' choice of providers. DDSN pays boards prospectively while requiring private providers to bill their competitors and wait for payment. DDSN boards are paid 100% so long as 80% of enrolled participants attend a day program, but private providers only receive payment for the actual number of participants in attendance. Some boards are not being held to the 30-day vacancy rule for residential beds. The agency should ensure that all providers are treated similarly and consumers have equal access to appropriate services. The band funding system prevents most providers from billing DHHS directly in violation of federal law, which clearly prohibits involuntary reassignment of Medicaid payments. DDSN's recommendations did not even address the issue of provider-directed Medicaid billing. Regardless of the findings and recommendation of the Mercer Health Group, this provider billing issue needs to be addressed immediately to bring the state in compliance with federal law. 87% of persons served by DDSN live at home with their family or in their own home. Yet DDSN continues to spend less than 12% of its budget providing services to these people. The Commission had to intervene in August in calling for a pause for the review of service plans by the new Waiver Administration Division, and it was further announced that a $2.4 million error was made in the calculation of the band payments. DDSN's recommendation to give DDSN total control of the band funding for those living at home, as well as final review and approval of service plans by the newly created Waiver Division, would create the conflict of interest prohibited by CMS final rule, and it's premature given the Mercer study has not yet been completed. There were legislative changes not mentioned in the agency's report. For example, the Nurse Practice Act allows direct care staff to administer medications in DDSN's facilities, yet those same caregivers who pass out medications in group homes cannot administer the same medications to individuals who live at home. Under current DDSN policy, a respite caregiver or personal care attendant cannot provide care for more than one waiver participant at a time. In group homes, staff may provide care for up to 4 waiver participants, and the ratio of clients to staff is even higher in day programs. Yet parents of 3 children who qualify for the waiver must locate 3 different respite caregivers to receive some relief from caregiving responsibilities. The agency ignored the legislative intent set forth in the Family Support Act by failing to provide workers' compensation coverage for direct caregivers who provide care in waiver participants' homes. Parents have been sued when workers are injured on the job, learn that some DDSN providers do not provide workers' compensation benefits. Unnecessary restrictions like these violate the intent of the Family Support Act and place a huge burden on families, and legislative changes are needed to address these issues. During the past 2 years, DDSN and DHHS were ordered by the courts to pay nearly $2 million in legal fees incurred in a case where the South Carolina Supreme Court required the agencies in 2011 to extend the age of onset for mental retardation from age 18 to 22. Yet the LAC reported in 2014 that DDSN continued to require families to show proof of intellectual disabilities by age 18 in violation of this ruling. South Carolina Code 442030 should be amended to clearly define the onset of intellectual disabilities as extending to age 22. In 2014, the South Carolina Court of Appeals ruled that the agency's caps on services for persons at risk of institutionalization violates the ADA. No standards have yet to be developed, and families are not being informed that this exception to waiver caps can be requested. Mr. Malley at the House Legislative Oversight Committee suggested that DDSN had been inaccurately portrayed by the Greenville News. But as former commissioners, we welcome the light shined on DDSN by the Greenville News, exposing what we need to be serious ongoing problems. It was the reporting from the Greenville News that finally caused the commission to freeze admissions to South Carolina Mentor. We believe that lives were saved by the public exposure of problems. Chairman Henderson was exactly on point with her concerns at the meeting that the agency had failed to promulgate regulations for the operation of its programs. As former commissioners, we supported the need for both DHHS and DDSN to promulgate regulations for the development and implementation of the state's Medicaid waivers. We support the need for the General Assembly to review the appeals process for disputes involving denial, reduction, or termination of Medicaid services. Both agencies should be required to promulgate regulations to inform participants and families of the standards and procedures applied to appeals. Finally, as former commissioners, we understand the pros and cons of the commission structure and governance. Given DDSN's reliance on Medicaid funding, it's imperative that the agency work cooperatively with DHHS. A lack of a single governing authority for these two entities means that if the agencies are unable to cooperate effectively, there's no designated entity to mediate disagreements regarding policy, funding, or respective roles of the two agencies. The General Assembly needs to clarify the roles and authority of DHHS and those of DDSN in providing services to consumers with disabilities. We supported the Senate recommendation that the General Assembly should establish a governing authority to mediate disputes between DHHS and DDSN on Medicaid-funded programs for individuals with disabilities, which could involve transferring DDSN to the Governor's Cabinet, establishing a joint legislative committee, or creating an appointed independent entity to arbitrate these disputes and make recommendations to the General Assembly. Those were just some of our recommendations, but I did feel like it was important for you to hear. And these were recommendations, like I said, myself and two other former DDSN commissioners prepared. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To commissioners update.
I just want to report that since our last commission meeting, I had the pleasure of touring a number of residences operated by Community Options here in the Midlands, and really had a wonderful day visiting a lot of those residences. Thank you for the invitation to Community Options, and it was very helpful to me as a commissioner to be firsthand on the ground, meeting some consumers and seeing some of the residences that are operating.
And I also toured some of the residences, and some of it I was very impressed. I think they're doing a good job, so. Ma'am? Vicki, anything? Thank you very much. Okay, the policy committee update.
Okay, the policy committee met again before the commission meeting. We're going to be developing our processes for reviewing the policies, directives, and standards for DDSN. We're going to try to differentiate between policies and procedures. We're going to put in place on the internet a place for people to make their suggestions about what our priorities should be as we start to review these directives and standards. Our next meeting will most likely be in November, unless we have a meeting by phone. We will try to construct a plan of action along with a process to achieve the overall goal of shifting governance back to the commission as required by state law. That's all. We don't have any recommendations.
Okay, so we don't have any motions. All right. Our director's report, Mary?
Okay, I don't have one, no.
Huh?
I was gonna say, I don't have one. Nothing happened in the last 2 weeks. Nothing has happened in the last 2 weeks. I do want to say that case management production has increased to a positive, almost $280,000 in August, which just shows that providers will react when given clear instruction and thorough explanation of the issues, and we appreciate their hard work. The HASKI waiver has been renewed, and we will be submitting the waiver manual updates to DHHS for approval. We've pushed back the CAP plan completion date to October 31st, and we're trying a more collaborative effort to work with providers on doing those CAP plans and getting them to have a free flow of ideas amongst one another, with us just being there to facilitate. 2018 DSP Recognition Week was September 9th through the 15th. Which brings me directly to the flow issue. Okay, so the hurricane wasn't exactly a recognition dinner or a recognition luncheon, but it was basically a demonstration of the dedication, determination, and durability of the folks that we have working. Having to evacuate from their homes, from the staff's homes, for an unknown duration of whatever the storm decided to do, because it really took a long time to make some decisions out there, kind of was a test of their durability. So DSP week was exactly what not exactly what most had planned, and most plans went on hold. It was an incredible showcase of what DSPs actually do, and we appreciate that. So to continue with Florence news, because basically that kind of ate up most of my first 2 weeks on the job, I want to thank the staff at PD Center, Coastal Center, leaving their families to maintain proper staff coverage, and those who worked up in the heat, putting up those hurricane shutters and cleaning out, I hear they were on the roof, cleaning out the drains and testing, in some cases, fixing the generators. I want to thank staff and managers of those residential providers who left their home to take folks they support to safer locations, and those who hunkered down with their staff and their individuals and sheltered in place to prepare for the worst. They were all prepared, praying for the best. We are still concerned about floodwaters in Horry County and Chesterfield County that are still rising. DDSN personnel, Reed Marshall, Joan Cooper, Pat Malley, managing the Emergency Operations Center, which did not close down, worked round the clock, and during the storm and post-storm. Sandra Delaney, Deborah Gahagan, and Colleen Honey for working during the closures, making sure those incoming calls were answered, and we did have calls from the community. I actually had to reach out to Florence County and ask for some assistance with an individual who was in their home and needed help evacuating. Nancy Hall and John Hitchman for maintaining constant contact with agencies and coordinating responses to needs for assistance, and John Hitchman for actually staying at PD Center throughout the entire storm. We appreciate that. Randy Davis, Ann McLean, Angela Wright, and Becky Hill, those are facility administrators at the centers, who either were preparing to receive folks or were staying with their individuals to maintain their safety during the storm. We had Susan Beck, Chris Carter, Mike Nichols for assisting with efforts to house evacuees at Babcock Center and Newberry. They were putting up cots and making beds. Other DDSN staff personnel who phoned and or reported to work during office closures to offer assistance when and where it was needed. So I also want to thank the boards who actually housed folks at Babcock Center, Florence, Newberry, Max Abilities, and I am forgetting one. Barton Center, thank you. To say thank you for your hospitality, which was very much on display during that time. Okay. That is really anything else?
Everything else is good? Great. Thank you very much. All right. Miss Melissa Ritter for the Spinal Cord Awareness Month. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Good morning. So September is Spinal Cord Injury Awareness Month. Thank you for the green ribbons, Mary. That was such a thoughtful way to acknowledge Spinal Cord Injury Awareness Month. Next door, as part of our awareness activities, we have Blakely Martin. Blakely is an artist from the upstate who sustained a spinal cord injury in a diving accident some years ago, and he has many of his paintings on display that he made particularly for this event today, and he's there to meet and greet you, so please go by after. And another way that DDSN supports prevention of spinal cord injury is through grants to the Think First program. Think First is an evidence-based national injury prevention program, helps people, particularly children, learn to reduce their risk of injury by thinking before they act. And Brian Denny works for the Spinal Cord Injury Association and also is the program coordinator for the Midlands Think First chapter. So he's going to speak with you for just a couple minutes about his role and the impact of the program.
Sure. Good morning.
Good morning.
The way the Think First program works is they put together a great video of different individuals that have either sustained a spinal cord injury or a traumatic brain injury. And they're real life, most of them are high school and some are young adults, but varying different situations. But we take the program into elementary, middle, and high schools. And last year, we did 51 presentations and reached over 1,000 students, mostly in middle school. But we did one elementary school and one high school last year. And it's an interactive presentation where we teach the kids some basics about what a spinal cord injury is, what a traumatic brain injury is, what the effects of that injury can be, how they can differ of someone who is a paraplegic versus somebody who's a quadriplegic, and what the difference in the paralysis is. And we open it up and we take what we call a VIP, which is Voice of Injury Prevention, but I like to think of it as very important person that comes, and that is somebody who actually has a spinal cord injury or a traumatic brain injury, and it gives the person the opportunity to kind of tell their story about how they sustained their injury, what life is like living with the spinal cord injury or traumatic brain injury, and it gives the students an opportunity to ask questions, and the kids never cease to amaze me, because I am also a VIP at times too, because I love doing it as well as being the program director and manager of it. But the kids are so intuitive. I mean, we do a lot with 6th and 7th grade, and some of the questions that they come up with, some of the kids, I mean, you know, I tell them that I'm married and I have 2 kids, and my kids were young when I was injured, and they ask, well, you know, how has your relationship changed with your kids, or how has it changed with your wife? And they really ask questions that you wouldn't think they'd ask like that. I mean, really heartfelt, thoughtful questions, and it makes a big impact. This week, I went to a parent open house and was just making the parents aware of the program that we do in their school, and had some students come up and say, yeah, I remember when you came in last year and spoke with us, and it made a difference. And it's just a great program that we have. I have teachers already sending me emails saying, are you planning on coming out to our school this year to do Think First again? And so it's a great way to partner with the community and just really bring awareness to what a spinal cord injury is, and what a traumatic brain injury is, and how they can understand when they see somebody like myself in a chair that lives with a spinal cord injury. They have an insight into what it's like to live day in and day out. But we're very thankful that we received the grant this year, and thanks for letting me come and speak.
Thank you so much for coming. Jerry Mize, he's going to give us the progress on the technical college training program. He's the executive director of the Tribble Center, which I had a wonderful time visiting not too long ago, and they had something called, it wasn't shaved ice, y'all call it?
Shaved ice.
Shaved ice, okay.
Yeah. And we've expanded upon that, but anyway, thank you for giving me some time this morning to explain the situation with Tri-County Tech. we wanted to create a certification program for direct care staff. That need is great. Turnover is great in the state. And when I mean great, I mean bad. About a year or so ago, an initial meeting was held with people at Tri-County Tech. And after that, nothing really happened. So we reached out to a different group of people to meet with representatives from Tri-County. Senator Alexander, the 3 executive directors, myself, Elaine Tina, Geraldine King, board members, and Pat Maley was there representing DDSN. So we wanted to create this certification program to bring people in that really wanted to be direct support staff. And so we held this initial meeting. Everybody was in agreement, and even Pat, after it was over, agreed to pay these folks once they go through the curriculum and the classes, that he would pay them $10 an hour to come to whichever county these people want to work in. They won't do direct care because they're not fully trained, but they can be there. It's almost like on the job training. They can observe and see, what the other direct care workers are doing. So, and we'll appreciate that. I did call Mary to update her. She's on board with it. Hopefully this thing will expand. And I will tell you that last month on August the 20th, they started classes. Now, they only had 6 people, but I guess 6 is better than nothing. This is not something that's just happened. This kind of thing has been tried across the state for many years. The good thing about this is that it's paid for. These folks do not have to pay a nickel out of their own pocket. Tuition, materials, the books, background checks, all of that is paid for. And we need to thank Representative Brian White from Anderson and Senator Alexander for making this happen. And so, you pay whatever the tuition is. I think this tuition is like $1,506. Plus, the materials. People are not going to pay that kind of money to go through these kind of classes and then go somewhere and make $11 or $12 an hour. They're just not going to. But I think if it's paid for, they will. Now, our issue now, we have to recruit more people. So we need to have job fairs. We need to go to high school guidance counselors and introduce this program to them. And hopefully the seniors of these high schools will, get on board and go to Tri-County and take this course. So the idea was to, once they are finished with this, they hit the ground running. And we want to be the employer of choice. Now, there are some things that aren't going to be taught through this curriculum that we have to do in-house. But as Mary said, which I thought was a great idea, when they're there observing, maybe instead of observing, they could take these classes like MedTech. And we have different agencies that take, that do like non-crisis behavior classes. I think there's MANT, there's NCI, and I think there's one other one. So not everybody, not every provider does that, but this can be done, and when they're through with their classes at Tri-County, they come to work for us. So, and we talked about too, maybe even at some point in time, we need to talk about supervision.
Yeah, we had a nice conversation yesterday about this, and we're going to be working on the committee structure again, but our committee is more focused on certain projects or things that are immediate. And of course, our staffing issue is one of the biggest issues we have. And I was telling Jerry, direct care staff, yes, that's a huge issue, but we also have to look around at our management structure. Where do we find folks to fill the residential directors and the day program, and then, work with folks to give them a career path, which is really kind of missing from our field. So that was something we wanted to work on, so maybe we can include supervision type classes, management classes, because just because you're a good DSP doesn't necessarily mean you can manage people.
Right.
And you can say that in any field. We were talking about just because you, just because you were a good basketball player doesn't make you a coach.
And he did.
And, yeah.
And
So
he failed miserably.
I think that we need to invest in the success of all of our folks, the folks that, of course, live with us and work with us, but also our staff. We have to invest in the success of them if we would like to be a success.
And we want people to stay with us because we want to reduce turnover. But the other side of that coin is our clients, especially in residential, well, day program too, they get used to these people, these people care for them. And it's like an extended part of their family. And then they up and leave because Hobby Lobby down the street's paying $15 an hour, so they're gonna go there.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you something else I think we need to drill down on is our benefits package. You know, we kind of gloss over that when they're talking with human resources. I think we really need to, you know, make a point of what they actually make and what this would cost them if they did go to Hobby Lobby and make $15 an hour.
Right. You have to put a dollar amount on that.
Absolutely, and we can do that. Yes, ma'am.
How long is the certification program?
12 to 14 weeks. Yeah, 3 days a week.
And where did the curriculum come from?
We developed it with the folks at Tri-County.
Now, is this something we could take around the state to other?
Absolutely. I know, and Vicki knows the person that's on their board, the board chairman of Tri-County, and he told me this could go statewide, so we're hoping that it does.
One of the things in the curriculum we would probably going to need to punch up, if it's not already in there, because I haven't seen it, it might be some person-centered thinking.
Right.
So we can get our direct care staff thinking about how to interact with individuals and listening to what people are saying, whichever way they listen, whichever way they talk to you, which could be body language or augmented devices, but to make sure that we start right at that baseline, because I think that's where you pick up the habits of the heart. Start there. So,
Jerry, thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, Mrs. Joan Cooper, could you come talk to us about the bids for the Coastal Center, please? And then I'm going to have
the
Pat
financial
next.
update.
I know, we're doing the financial update, but I'm going to let you come first and then you can scoot.
Yes, I'm presenting two bids here for consideration. One is for Coastal Center roof replacement of Admin B1, Highlands 210, kitchen warehouse, and annex. Our low bid was from Keating Roofing, and they've worked for us before, and it's $585,000.
I gotta know, how big is that roof? That seems like a hell of a lot of money for a roof.
Well, it's five.
It's 5 buildings?
Yes.
That's still $100,000 a roof. Are they putting slate on there or what? It's just curiosity killed the cat.
So, that was within the budget, that's what the budget was. And the second one is also a Coastal Center, that was a roof that was discovered to have a structural issue later on, and was approved as an interim project, and that is for Highlands 310 roof repairs and replacement, and the bid there is also Keating Roofing for $274,870.
Do we have any other questions? Do you have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Anything else?
Okay. I think we're good. All right, now we're gonna have Pat Maley for the financial update.
Good morning. I'll do the financial update first. This is the best one of the year to do. We have lots of money and we don't have a spending plan yet, so we're in great shape. Next month I'll have a spending plan and we'll be able to look at it a little bit closer, but I'll just move on from there, okay? I'd like to do the budget first because I think the spending plan may have more discussion, if that's okay.
Okay.
We're in an awkward budget year because two of our most important initiatives, we just don't have the data to support a specific budget request. What we're doing in our budget is we're leaving these spots open, so as we go through the fall, we'll be able to collect data, certainly on the ICF Regional Center maintenance effort. And secondly, on the probably our most important need, which is not quantified, is the consumer service rates in the community. Our strategy is Mercer's rate study should be done in January of 19. I think we have to leave open the possibility of inserting a budget package after we get the rates. I think the chances are remote or not great, but by not being able to get those rates into the budget this year, we're going to wait 12 months before we get it in again. So I think part of our strategy is in our briefings in the fall to tell them these rates are coming. I think we're in a very good position where both the House and the Senate leadership on the committees that look at our budget, both are waiting for a rate study. They will fund it or fund it as much as they can. They just kind of have a rate study to underpin their decision. So that's part of our strategy is we're keeping that, hoping we can get that in when the rates become available. And the second area, which I spoke at length with Chairman Ravenel about, and I assure you I will get you a budget package this fall for regional centers. We started looking at this summer, and we're going to prepare a budget package. And what I determined is I got to have at least one cost study, and we have to do our own internal analysis of the regional centers, because where they're short is they may have some brick and mortar issues, but they're really short on personnel. When it comes to staffing levels and nursing staffing levels, we have to go into those regional centers, and me and Rufus already have a plan, and we're going to start it next week after this commission meeting to identify those staffing levels and build standards from which we can then build budgets upon to show our needs are greater than our current cost levels. And then from there we can articulate a needs effort for regional centers and hopefully get them funded. Because what has happened over the years is just as this agency has done a great job at depopulation, the depopulation money takes regional centers money, and then there's overhead issues, and there's just been an erosion of money for the regional centers, and it's time to rebase them as well. And we can do that this fall, and I'm confident we can get a package together and insert it before the legislators show up in January. And after coming through two performance reviews in the House and Senate, my group is very supportive of our mission, very supportive of our needs. They just want to make sure that our ducks are in order before we ask for resources. So I think we'll be in good position there. So our strategy for the budget, where we put dollars on, has been to stick to the core mission, which is approximately $17 million. Going through the budget process last year, the focus is on the core mission. And so if we focus on these, I think we have a better chance of getting them, as well as creating space for the future budget packages. So I'll start with the first one, which is the $10.4 million or $1 increase for direct care workers. This is the third year of the plan. The first 2 years were well received by the General Assembly, and we just got the $12 increase. I'm hopeful sometime this fall we'll be able to go to regional centers in the community to get some sort of gauge on what is the impact of those $2 increases. And certainly last year the impact was, it was well received, but as far as dropping turnover dramatically at the regional centers, I can tell you it did not have an effect there in the community. I think $2 will give us a better indicator. Any questions on that one? Our second increase is $1.1 million for 27 individuals for residential placement. We had a lot of discussions about how much we should ask for. And our judgment was we have a history in the General Assembly of getting money and taking multiple years to execute it. And so this year, unfortunately, we have Rufus up here with us who has a lot of experience at building residential settings and Mary. We were in full agreement that we need to ask for houses that we can put to work within 9 months after getting the money. And starting next week, we're going to find a person who is gonna own that responsibility, and that's gonna do all the planning so that when the money arrives, we can execute that mission. And all of a sudden, we may find we have greater capacity to do that, but we gotta build our credibility and the ability to use funds in the year in which they give us. So we're going for 27 high management residential settings. One of the houses and 3 of the occupants will be developed by DDSN. And our concept of operation there is we have 25 people at Correct Care who are all in state funds, state funded, $152,000 a year. I would estimate a majority of them are suitable for residential placement that could be Medicaid matched, as well as a better place for the consumers. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna build this 3-person house so that as people enter into our systems, because one of our real traffic jams is our consumers in jails, in the criminal justice system, which we're getting the phone calls to take them right now. And it takes us a long time to place them, and sometimes we place them in Correct Care because it's the only place that we have a spot. So what we're gonna do is create a 3-bed capacity so that we as an institution can bring people there, get Medicaid matched, triage their capabilities, and find a better place for them in the system. But our goal was just to get as many out of Correct Care as possible and only use Correct Care for those that truly need a locked facility. Any question on that?
When talking about appropriateness, because in the community, we could be doing habilitation, we can be doing training, and they're not getting that at Just Care. So the thought of moving on and being more independent, understanding your rights, your responsibilities, that's not happening there. And by moving those folks out, it's not even just cost benefit, it's a human benefit, because they would be able to start to move on with their lives when you're in limbo over there. So that was a big issue, a discussion that we had, that it's more appropriate for folks.
And how many people do we have in that situation now?
We have 25 at Correct Care right now. And some of them actually need to be in a locked facility, but certainly not all of them. I would say a majority of them are suitable for residential placement in a high needs environment and a highly controlled environment.
Okay.
Number 3, child protective custody transition. This is what you'll see the next group of budget requests is just what we noticed in our budget is we would go for the big asks for the General Assembly because it is a very competitive environment there to get new funds. But at the same time, I think we were forgetting about the bread and butter issues of we have consumers with increased, we have services that are in higher need. And we weren't asking for those funds to meet those 20%, 10% increases. So what we're happening is we're incrementally consuming ourselves. And so what we have to do is kind of reverse that trend. And that when we see budget items that we are projecting these increases, I think we need to ask them because we're providing services. And if we don't get them, it comes from somewhere. A good example was last year, we had a very appropriate $300,000 addition to the HASKI waiver for pest services. But we didn't get it funded, so that's $1 million of service money that comes from the system. And I think we have to start watching our incremental erosions so that we keep our core state funds solid. So that's why we're asking for these funds. And number 3 in particular, what happens there is you have juveniles in the DSS system, and they will get to the age of 18 or 21, and all of a sudden we'll get the phone call and we'll take full responsibility for them. And then all of a sudden we're paying for state funded services, we're paying for a CTH1, and this is all coming out of unfunded. We have no money for these people, but we do it because we have to. So what we're going to do this year is we want 10 slots so that when the predictable number of people aged to the age of 18 or 21, whenever they're going to come out of DSS services, we will again have advanced planning to know who they are, be in a position to get them Medicaid qualified so that when they turn 18, we can get them on a CTH1 residential services, and they'll stay in place with their foster families. So we're just trying to get ahead of these curves and shore up the unfunded mandates.
Again, you're trying to do some proactive work, working with DSS, anticipating the folks aging out, and having conversations with foster parents about the CTH1 program to see if we can develop. Because many times these children have been there for a while and they're already bonded with that family. But when they age out, there's no money. So some families, they're in limbo. Again, we leave people sitting in limbo. We can't do that.
And a lack of placement, they may end up in CTH2 when in fact, with a little bit of planning, we can.
CTH1, yep.
So that's.
And with the family that they've known.
Any questions on 3? Number 4 is early intervention. Early intervention, our role is 3 to 6. And as you all know, BabyNet and early intervention has been increasing at a rapid pace over the last 3 or 4 years. HHS has assumed ownership of BabyNet, but that model of generating services to 0 to 3 increases our 3 to 6 population for our services by 20% a year. So we're just asking for the incremental increase to cover our costs. Number 5 is it's $1.5 million for Medicaid at-home service rate increase. This was the situation that happened in June, where HHS raised 5 service rates by 8%. We provide the same services in a waiver, and they were gracious to coordinate with us and coordinate us 1 year money so that we could raise our rates to match theirs, so there's equilibrium in the system. And now we're asking for recurring funds to fund that 8% increase that's number 6, increased access to post-acute rehabilitation. This is a recurring need for that population. It is a need that is a state-funded service. After a traumatic brain injury or spinal cord injury, there's a period of time after the injury where rehabilitation has great benefits to ameliorate the condition. And we, for years, have always been a little bit behind the curve, but our providers have been gracious to basically hold their bills in the spring and until we get a new year of money. And the General Assembly has been very gracious about providing us about $500,000 a year so that we can keep up with services. So I would say that this is one where it's a good example of maintaining focus on covering our costs of increased service needs. Any questions on that? Number 7 is $2 million for Greenwood Genetics.
$2 million?
We've had, I mean, this agency has had a long-term relationship with Greenwood Genetics. Greenwood Genetics needs have been funneled through the DDSN budget process, and they have a great preventative mission. But this is a $2 million request in 1 year for 5 years for $10 million. This is a large commitment for the General Assembly to address. And my recommendation as we move forward in the budget process, that we bring along Greenwood Genetics to argue their justification for $2 million, because although there's a need, we have our needs too. And I don't want our needs to be undermined by competing needs of Greenwood Genetics. Now, I think they're all valuable things, but at the same time, I think they would be in a better position to articulate the merits of a research project, and we'd be in a better position to articulate the needs of people who need services now. So it's part of our budget. We'll advocate for it, but my recommendation is that Greenwood Genetics sits at the table and advocates for their funds, and they would be a better advocate for it. Does that sound reasonable?
Well, y'all, everybody knows how I feel about the Greenwood Genetics, all the money that they get, and I think they should go. I think they do a wonderful job and everything, but I've been on that board, we have somebody who's on that board, but I agree with you. I think they need to come and get their own money because.
Plus, it's a research project. It is very technical.
Yeah,
I think they're in a better position to
absolutely.
explain it.
Well, I'm assuming this budget request Are you going to ask for our approval on it today?
Yes.
So these are priority orders?
That's a draft priority orders. We can, this is not a final document. This is just our proposal. And our job here today is to, if we want to adjust those priorities or add, subtract to it.
Well, we're saying that the Greenwood Genetics Program is ahead of the community service provider rate and the immediate ICF regional center rate.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I thought we discussed putting that down at number 9.
I
Greenwood
think they
Genetics.
should definitely be at the bottom.
Roger that.
Our budget request at all. I mean, I'm
Exactly.
struggling a little bit with why it's part of our budget request. I'm not commenting on the nature of their work. But they're making a budget request to the General Assembly, and the General Assembly happens to funnel that through DDSN in the years that they grant it.
But it's them who should be requesting it.
It's what?
It's them that should be requesting it.
Yeah.
That's,
Why are we requesting it?
And they always say it comes through our budget.
right.
History, tradition, they're not a state agency that can be directly appropriated to. In a legislative state where legislators have priorities they want to address, and Greenwood has been part of DDSN, but that's how it's been a traditional way of doing it, and it had
They have a
it's
strong
just-
presentation. They will get what, I'm pretty sure they probably will get the 2 million.
And they have very strong support in the House, but I don't know, it always, in my view, it always makes us look a little bad. But because they have such a, they get so much, I wish we would get that extra $2 million and then go get their own money. But that's not the way it's done.
Okay.
Is there any way I'd like to put this on another page behind our request?
We can structure it any way we want to structure it.
No,
So-
just to show that this is just through pass-through money. It's theirs to ask for, it's theirs to present. We realize it's got to come to our agency, but, in our list of priorities, it's not even in our list of priorities because it's their request.
It should be the bottom one.
Or a separate page.
Or a separate page.
Of just budget pass-throughs that we're.
But if we don't prioritize it, then somebody's going to prioritize it.
Yeah.
So do we want to say in our world, it would be a 9? Because that is where we have our say.
I just think it ought to be separate.
Yeah,
Me
well, we can
too.
separate it, but then just realize that somebody else is gonna prioritize it for us. If we want them to do that,
But it
then,
makes our total fund requested right now is 16.4. If that's on a separate document, that makes our total funds requested 14.4, which we're more likely to get than 16.4.
well, are they asking, did they ask us to present for them, or did they say, we want this year?
Last year I presented for them. They briefed me on what they wanted, and
Yeah.
it was very well received.
So they're
before
asking you,
testified.
well, they do a lot of other things, but I mean,
Yes.
are they
I think they
asking for the
briefed
2
outside of
million?
what our normal chain is.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
But they were well aware of it and very supportive of their.
but they're asking you and us to put 2 million in there. Is that their request? Is that their request? I mean, or is that us saying?
The history is our request, of which it then goes to them. They do have a preventative mission.
They do. I mean, I'm not sure, I mean, I've read a little bit about that genomic initiative. That is, it seems like a very worthwhile thing. But I'm also concerned about the ICF rates because they can't keep losing money, so.
Okay. Maybe we could have a recommendation where we will check with the executive budget office, where we will send the final package, and then possibly, we'll position it as either last or separate, whichever is appropriate, but certainly in a position that doesn't undermine our priorities.
Well, you could say this is what they are requesting and let somebody else prioritize.
The last, since I've been here, they have asked for $500,000.
Yes, ma'am.
And what now are they asking for to do? What is it, do they have, they say they have a new project they're doing. What is it they now need $2 million for? I think, we should know.
Yeah, well, the information we're providing, and again, it is a 5-year research project. They're involving private providers, the Duke Endowment, There's a major university lineup. It's a legitimate investment in a research project. And the proposal that we were given is $2 million for 5 years is the investment. But the data that we have is a Reader's Digest version that I don't think any of us are qualified as to the merit of.
Is this the genome?
I think the asker with a history of success and respect in the state, they'll defer to their, has a level of credibility. But again, I think I go back to original kind of agreement that it is such a big ask that we have to present it along with us.
They are very fortunate because we're in a situation where we have to ask for basic needs.
Yes, ma'am.
And they're in a place where they have they have all their facilities, all the stuff, and they're able to really reach for the stars here and some of the stuff. We're not in that good a shape.
No.
We're struggling to get by.
And it's the Taj Mahal. I mean, I've been around the country and seen lots of places. It's the nicest facilities that you will ever see, and I get furious when I go there because I've just come from a regional center or something like that. I'm going like, why is this so nice? And, we're given, I know it's a pass-through and the whole thing, it's wonderful, and I think they do great work. Go raise that money, if they want to do these. Don't get me started, because I sit on that board and it drives me nuts. And it's the way they handle it.
We will need some, tomorrow's the deadline for the budget package, executive budget office. We have all the time till tomorrow, 5 o'clock, but,
no pressure.
I think we're in the general direction. I guess I need some sort of guidance as to how we want to finalize it under your authority so that we can find the best way to position it to allow them to promote their efforts, but at the same time, not have them.
Make it clear that this is our ask and this is what they're asking for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so.
Separate.
It's a separate.
Separate.
Not equal.
If you want a motion or something, I'd move that it be a separate item, separate from our list of priorities.
Okay.
Second.
And what I was always told, they're going to get it even, so just be quiet.
Yep.
Because the legislatures,
It's a matter
they've
of
got.
principle. I mean, I know they've got really strong.
They have really strong
legislative-
things, but now they're going for, $500,000 is one thing, but all of a sudden they do have a new director who just came from Georgia. My problem is I know too much and it just drives me.
Well, I hope they get it, but I hope we get ours.
Yeah, but I think we need to get more than that because this is a year, I don't know. I just went to a party and a legislature told me, he said, Eva, if this is the year, if you want some extra things, you better ask for them and promote them because we do have a surplus. Came from, I can't tell you who he was, but it came from a legislature.
How about this maybe as a possible
Sorry to be a.
solution is, in order to stay with the executive budget office form, I'm afraid they're going to cater that for form, can we just make it an unranked request, and then we'll write some sort of note at the top saying exactly the intent of what you said here, which is basically this is such a large request that they're going to, as part of our budget, but we're not ranking it, and that we will have Greenwood along with us at the budget presentations so that they can argue the merits of their request. And that
I
way,
would present it as this is what they are requesting as an attachment.
Yeah.
Just don't even, this is from them, not from us.
okay.
I mean, Pat, I think we've got to give you, this is due tomorrow at 5 o'clock. I think you understand the concerns
Yes.
of the commission. I would say do what you have to do format-wise to comply with what you need to submit, but try to convey what our concerns are.
I will try to have it separate, and if it's a format issue, I will make it unranked. And either way, I will disclose it the way we discussed it today.
Yeah. So you need actually a motion on the entire spending.
Yeah, but we have two more.
But we have a motion on the floor, which is.
And I can withdraw the motion with Pat's assertions of what he will do.
Okay.
We'll do that by general consensus and then it can go in there.
All right. You want to go with community service? I see it's under development.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Here's our big.
I thought it was done.
We don't have that number. So this is where the ask is going to be.
Yeah.
And this is not pie in the sky. The reason it's not pie in the sky is even though we're gonna get the rates late, a senior, most influential member in the House and the most influential member in the Senate who are over our budgets personally said, we are waiting for a rate study to help you. Because they know the community rates need to be upgraded. We just got to get, so either we come in late, I don't think we're going to show up late and they're going to say, hey, you're late. I think we have a chance to get back in line if it's January or even February. So I don't want to remove that possibility. And I think if we brief it along the way, then they say no when it comes around, but at least we create the expectation that there's a possibility.
This is a great improvement because we were asking to remodel the kitchen when the roof was leaking before. And what you're doing is pointing out these things that we're already paying for, these adjustments that we have to make. These are necessity items that we just would reach for the stars and then not include. And I think that's might have been some of our problem.
I think we used to have it in the system. We ain't got in the system anymore.
Right.
And we
Yeah.
kind of consumed ourselves.
But
here.
it's a good step forward, really good.
That was one of the things during development, was to look at the areas that we historically took care of and start pulling them to actually asking for dollars for them. And the fact that you can go back and pull the math to show where the dollar came from, I think that's impressive, because that's always been an issue. We couldn't actually kind of bring it forward and say, this is how we got this number. In fact, I've actually watched the number be, and I hate to say this, but actually came down because she's like, I can't justify that number. I can justify this number. And I think that Lisa did a lot of work on this budget and to verify that what we're asking for is true. And to start building that trust when we talk about mending fences and building bridges, this is a good step in the right direction as far as making sure that we're asking for a verifiable amount, which really impressed me. That, and they answered all my questions, which I was very impressed with because I asked a lot.
And then the ICF, the preliminary work that myself and Rufus has done, there's no question in my mind, we can have a budget package this fall after the cost study from, that we'll get in October, and we'll do the work. We got to build standards. We know we have a nursing shortage, but we have a hard time articulating what should the number be. And we can once we establish those standards and we see how pay has just gotten so contorted because we rely so much on contractors. It's just, when we do an analysis, we'll see. If we actually want to staff it correctly, we may have to have an across the board raise so that we don't have to depend on contractors. So it's going to be a cost, but I think everybody would say that this isn't an incremental solution. I think it's been incrementally shaved for many years, and now we're at the point where when we do the math, I think we might surprise ourselves of how much personnel needs we do have to get ourselves back up to what we feel the standard that we think is appropriate.
Good.
So I will do that. Again, I apologize, I don't have it here.
No, that's okay, that's okay.
Okay, so.
Pat, can I ask questions, because I'm not really sure exactly. And you might have already answered this. So I know we need more funds for people living in homes. Where in this budget is it in here? Is that the 8%? Is that kind of?
For residential settings?
Yeah.
We're asking for 27 new residential beds.
No,
Two.
no,
Number
I'm
two.
sorry. I got that one. I
Okay.
understand that one. What I'm asking for is for more money for people who live with their families.
At home with.
Yes. And I also want to know where it is, because I don't understand. Where is there more money in here for respite care?
Here's my answer to both those questions.
Okay.
Again, it goes back to credibility.
Right.
We were provided at-home waiver slots. What were the years? 15, 17, 15, 16.
So where is it?
We have pending slots right now of
Right.
1,300 that, with the changes that HHS has agreed to do, we've not
Right.
implemented, basically, you can't get in line without Medicaid.
Right.
We could speed that up and possibly den it 700 or 800 people this year, but we can't ask for more money because we still have money we haven't spent. So it has a combination of case managers, but we got to get that squared away so that in the future, we can ask for a certain amount and execute it every year. Now, as far as money available, it kind of gets back to the band systems in which we operate.
Right.
We have the at-home money is generally in the band Bs, the IDRD, or the band Is, CS waiver. And right now, when you combine the two, the band B waivers are about exceeding what we give them. So if I'm a provider, I'm saying I need a rate increase.
Right.
Now for the Is, it is about if there's $39 million in the I band, last time I checked, there was 16 or 17 unspent. Now, part of
Wait a minute, 16 or 7, wait a minute, when you say 16 or 7, 16 or 70 million?
No, but then you get into the whole notion of a capitated system where I need that money over here. And it gets back to the whole Rubik's Cube of what is the right amount of money. But my answer to you for more money for at-home is waiver slots, we can't ask for it until we execute what we have. And as far as more money in the system for at-home, I think just looking at the people currently in the system, the people currently in the system have budgets and they're all funded.
Okay.
So I don't think anybody is not funded based on our current service or service options and caps. The question is, do we want to look at those type of issues? And that has to do with the new payment system. I think the big decisions for us as an organization, when we start going down the road of a new payment system, all of a sudden, all these things come into play as far as what policies do we want? How do we want, what level of service packages do we want? If we want to have more robust service packages for at home, then it comes from somewhere. It's trade-offs. But as we stand today, we can't ask for slots until we execute the ones we have.
Okay, then let me ask more questions.
The other issue with that is also looking at our process on how we look at plan amendments, requests for additional hours, or how we, determine that. We got to look at our assessments to make sure that they are assessing the actual need, so that when PCA assessment is assessing PCA services, and a respite assessment is assessing respite needs. That is ongoing. And so that, if you're talking about somebody's needs for additional services, that is that process. Then we had to stop the bleeding with not having the 8% funded, which is, what is asked for in here.
Right.
And then it's now figuring out how to, and I'm all about simplification. I'm a simple gal, and I want things to be simple. I want to be able to read it once, get it, and be done with it. And I think that we're looking at that for how we're doing the enrollment process. Although it's a very cumbersome system at this point, there are some things we can tweak to get folks on the waiver, so we're not sitting on a waiting list longer than we need to be. So it's kind of like 3 different issues as I see it. One of them is looking at the service array and make sure we're assessing what needs to be assessed, make sure we have a good process in place to either approve or sometimes deny the service based on the assessment, and then move on to funding what has not been funded. We need to ask for that, and then finally rolling out those slots as soon as we possibly can and doing a better job getting them out. So that is pretty much the kind of like a 3-prong approach from what again, it's what I've seen for a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any questions? Go ahead.
This is kind of following up on what you were asking, on money to at-home consumers.
Right.
So first a question, I'm looking on the website, the reimbursement rates that are listed for qualified providers. So respite is listed at $11.30 an hour. PCA is listed at $14 an hour. That is the current rate with the 8% already built in. Is that correct?
I don't think so.
It says updated as of July 1st, 2018, but I didn't know if that meant with that 8%.
No, the 8% would be above that, wouldn't it?
Yes.
8% above that.
Those are not.
So you get 8%.
Are you on the
above that.
HHS website or
No, I'm on
ours?
our website.
You probably need to look at the
This is
HHS.
July 1st, and they are updated rates.
So $14 an hour is the rate that PCA is reimbursed at.
PCA providers are reimbursed.
Right, well, that was my
Okay.
next question, actually.
Yeah, because it's not the person that actually lays hands on the
Right.
individual.
Then the next question is, do providers have any kind of directive as to what percentage of that money must be used to pay the person?
Nope, they're private businesses.
It's just whatever they set.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have data on what they're actually paying?
Not just the PC that's in my house. She gets
Okay.
$10 an hour.
And mine gets $9 an hour, and I'm really tired of the agency getting 14 and my worker getting 9. That means the agency's getting $5 an hour.
And this agency pays $10 because they can't find workers for $9. So business requires you doing what you need to do you don't have business if you don't have workers to go do the PCA hours. So as a business owner, you have to make those decisions. Do I pay more? Do I pay, and it's a private business. I think that is pretty much, I don't think HHS prescribes what folks have to pay, and so left.
So once we get out of the ban system, things should improve that also?
I think when you get out of the ban system, you will have rates that are calibrated every 3, 4, 5 years so that they meet the needs of the provider. And part of the analysis of a rate study is they factor in the profit margin. They factor in the 8 or 9%.
Or there has to be some margin.
And they factor in things, but ways you can address that is you can address that by having certain minimum requirements. Residential, the rates can do what you want to do, and if that's a risk, I think you can add things to it, but I think the direction is not to be prescriptive, it's to figure out what it takes, profit margin to attract people, and then set the standards and qualifications to do it.
Right.
Otherwise, we have to hire all these workers to chase after those things, and hopefully that's where our quality assurance comes in. But they all have to be working together, and right now, I think they're not as tight as they can be to reduce that risk.
Probably depends on your market too, where you are. If there's a lot of competition, they have more people and they can pretty much do more. But if you're up in a rural area where there's not a lot of folks to hire, just like we're having trouble in the same places, that's what dictates businesses' ebb and flow of what they pay folks.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
So I would like to make a motion then, if you're ready for a motion, that we approve the spending plan as presented, except that the
Genome.
genomic, what is that? I'm butchering that, number 7.
Greenwood Genetics and.
Yeah.
That number 7 be, except for number 7. I mean, I want to, and then you have to do what you have to do with number 7. So we'll just say that it be not prioritized as number 7, presented separately if possible, and if not, in whatever format would be acceptable, to let people know that it's coming from Greenwood Genetics.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
Thank you, Pat.
Right. Spending plan.
Which one is that? Which tab is that?
It is, 6. Second row, spot.
What I want to do is just walk you through obviously the net revenue expenses for this year and what we forecast for excess revenues, which is good news. Then I want to walk you through the revenues. Then I want to walk you through expenses. And then the last thing I want to do is have a discussion on the risk of, the variability risk of this forecast. And that's what we all have to understand, because I think that affects how we move forward as far as executing our plan where we are growing or we're new position where we're very conservative cost reductions and revenue reduction, revenue enhancement. So let me get the basic math out of the way, and then we'll get into the risk discussion. The estimate we did this year is we're expecting about $720 million in revenues, $718.5 million expenses, with excess revenue available of approximately $1.7 million, which means we end up in the black, which is always good. Go to the next page where we're talking about revenues. And on this sheet of the revenue sheet, the total of $720 million, we have 11 revenue sources. And when you're preparing the forecast, 11 of them had little to zero variability, meaning if it's on that page, we're going to get that number. The problem is, of those 11, they only represent about 37% of our budget. The Medicaid revenue, which represents 62.5% of our budget, is where we have variability risk, where we estimate that using assumptions and estimates and historical trends and whatever else we can put into the judgment, it has variability. And so for that number to come out at 450 on the number, it could be plus or minus. It could be plus or minus $5 or $6 million. And as I get through it, I'll talk to you about it, because we have to plan for the downside risk, and we also have to plan for what we're going to do this year to make sure that the downside risk worst doesn't happen. But I just want to focus you, that's where all our risk is when it comes to revenue. When we build our revenue, we have 8 revenue areas, and I won't go into IDRD waiver, CS waiver, ASCII waiver, and a number of smaller ones. We have to build assumptions into them. And I want to thank Lisa and our financial team. We started this year with the notion of just a fresh set of eyes so that we're not going to assume anything, which means we went through each one of those buckets of revenues and we challenged every assumption that we've been using. Because what you end up having to do, in order to make a good estimate, you have to have validated criteria. And a good example is that is in the prior year for day program revenue, we assumed it was north of 80% capacity. It might have been closer to 90%. And then when we went and we revalidated that, we found that the number is much less than 80%. So our revenue is going to be less than we expected. And the reason we do that is because the better assumptions we have, the better precision we have in our estimate. And I say that because when we went through and validated every one we could, and some of them are very easy, it shows that things do change year from year. And when we validate these, we get a better outcome, but there's still, even with the best estimate we can, there's still variability in the system. And I'll give you a couple examples to appreciate how the band system has that fluctuating capabilities. And this is a good news story. For the last 4 or 5 years, we've been losing about $300,000 a month, $3.6 million a year, supplementing case management, meaning what we paid to providers, we were not getting revenue from Medicaid.
Why? Can I ask why?
I'll get that one.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'll get that one.
Okay, I'll be quiet.
And it was part of the band system. When you have so many moving parts, you're just keeping up with the day to day, and you see that there. And what stimulated us to look at it was there was an agreement many years ago about moving to market rates as opposed to capitated rates for case management. And so we're working with HHS to at some point in the next 3 or 4 or 5 months, go to market rates. And market rates are lower than what we're getting paid now. Trust me on the math. So in order for boards to break even, they have to build more. And what we found is, because of the capitated model, it created just some inefficiencies in billing. If you're going to get paid regardless of whether you bill, you may not bill every minute or as efficient as you can. And we met with providers, and providers have everybody kind of grabbed this ball ourselves. We said, okay, we got to get our efficiencies up. so that we know exactly where we are in this current system, so that before we go to a market rate, we'll know what the consequences are. And if we started this in April, May, June, July, August, in 4 months, they went from a $300,000 a month deficit to a $200,000 profit, meaning we're bringing in more money than we're spending out. That's going to end in the next 3 or 4 months. And if Ralph was here, he'd probably want his money now. But it shows you how the band can change so quickly by different attention to different variables. And so the band, whether you talk about other rates, we're very dependent on the revenue from the provider system. And some things are very simple to provide. They can provide residential beds and the day program information. That's pretty much cut and dry, although there may be some risk in there that we do. But there's other ancillary costs that they pay QPLs. We rely on them to give us the bills so that we can bill for it. Do we get them all? I'm not sure we get them all. But there's ways we can work with the providers to shore up those leakages in the system. But my point of all this is, we're projecting revenue based on the way the providers have historically worked. And the providers have a very tough job out there, and I'm the first to tell you that they're overall, wherever they should be, they're a little bit below it. Our rate study is going to tell us where they're at. But at the same time, as they're cutting costs, they're a business. They got to maintain their own cash reserves. And I think one of the areas that everybody has to be aware of, is a big risk to us, is in the past, the band system had a 98% requirement. You just spend 98% of the money we gave you. Meaning if I gave you, $1 million, you had to spend $980,000 of it. You could keep 20 and carry it over. That 20 is state funds. And that 98%, if they spend it, they generate Medicaid for us. A couple of years ago, there was, when you have a shortage of funds, people are looking to protect their equities. A decision was made to lower that to 90%. Now, boards could not lower it to 90%. They couldn't do their job. But it could be dipping below 2%. And my point is, every percent it drops, that's $5 million in state funds that is on the sidelines, not being used for services. And that $5 million would generate 13 more million of services. So the band system, the way it works, money that ends up in excess revenue for them really hurts us. And we can't control that. So it presents a risk to us that if the providers in 1 year decide to sit on 1% more of the money, we'd be $13 million short revenue. That's the risk of the band system. And that's why the band system is just too unreliable. It has many deficits. It's just one more that is really unacceptable for an organization, particularly with low cash reserves. So that's my pitch for the revenue side. On the expenditure side, if you look at that chart, again, I'll give Lisa and her team credit. We look at it with fresh eyes, and you'll see a couple of new entries this year that you haven't seen in the past. Our base expenditure is $543 million, which are the community contracts that we approved in June. Our first adjustment to that is $8.9 million reduction. And in the past, there were adjustments that kind of washed, that we didn't articulate, but I guess I'm the conservative approach, and so is Lisa more than me, and we're tracking every penny to make sure that we're not missing something. So rather than assuming some of these washes, we look at each transaction, and obviously this was, the first one has to do with the issue of, it's a legitimate issue. Of our $543 million in contracts, we have probably $13 million to Charles Lee and Jasper for PCA respite services. Well, the rest of the costs are in the bands too. So when you execute all of our contracts, as you're paying Jasper, you're reducing the bands. So it is a wash. So we know our overall expenditures because of the interrelatedness of these two contracts, at the end of the year, we're going to be theoretically $13 million less. But then again, nothing is really simple in the bands, because we couldn't completely reduce the $13 million, because the way the system works, is we will pay Jasper, we will expense the money to Jasper, and then they will give us the bills back to present the Medicaid for reimbursement. But because we're in a waiver and we're a cost settlement business, we have to put the match with it. So I'm paying 100%, and then I'm adding my match to it, so I'm paying 128% this year. Okay, so why am I doing that? To make the system work. It's another add-on to a complicated system to make it work. Now, theoretically, 2 years from now, when the costs settle, we'll have more expenses than Medicaid billings, and we'll get our money back. But that's on the assumption that we two-way settle. And two-way settlements no longer occur. So the logic model for doing this puts us at risk of literally losing money on these transactions. So we're going to have to take a look at that entire respite process to make sure that in a one-way settlement world that we're not shooting ourselves in the foot. But the point is, a simple duplication of contracts because they're interconnected we end up funding about $4 million a year in extra funds that we'll get back in 2 years. That's great if we have a reserve of $20 million. If we have a reserve of $4 million, that's the difference between being red and black. That's the thin lines that we're walking through. The second line is a increase of $21 million, and that is a function of two things. It's a function of, as we have transactions like Jasper and Charles Lee, which we call provider credits. You also have waiver credits, which are very similar, where the QPL will bill HHS. HHS gets the bill, they pay the bill. Well, they go collect their 70%, give us 30%, and we pay the match. But when you do that transaction, the net effect is we don't see the revenue over here of 70%. And so when we claw the 100% out of the payments, we only expense 30% of it. And so my recommendation going forward is we need another accounting entry to add 70% revenue and add 70% expense so that we true up our books. But it is a wash transaction. And my point is, under the current accounting process, we do drop because of these waiver credits. And then 2 years ago, right, 2 years ago, with ICS, IGPs, the way AHS pays us for our ICFs in the community and the regional centers, they changed the way they pay us. Essentially is they'll give us 100% of the money, and then each month they take out equivalent to 30% of our match. So we net out our 70%. And I think you can account for that two ways. You can account for it. I think you can net it against your income, or you can claim all your income and add 30% expense. And we like to do the latter. That's what that does, is add extra expense, it adds extra revenue. It's a transaction for consistency. We're keeping it that way, but I would make an argument this year that we consider netting it so that our books are more reflective of economic reality. What that does is it adds more money to the community services, and then you split that between the regional centers. But my point is, we're tracking all those waiver credit transactions so that we're not surprised with something in there of expense that we're not anticipating. That sounds a little overly complex, and I would say it is overly complex. And I would say in 1998, the band system, when you only had 39 fiscal agents and it was a small group all dealing with each other, it was a very doable process. We just had to add so much complexity. I think Ms. McPherson was talking about today. We pay one provider this, we pay one provider that. It just turns into one of those things where you just got to simplify. And that's what we're wrestling with for a forecast. And the more complexity you have, the more risk you have in your forecast. As we go down, it all gets easier from here. As we go down, $107 million for the regional centers, $8.6 million for administration, and so that's $672 million in expenditures. And then we have to add the adjustments from our budget as well as a few other things. We're adding the $4.6 million in expense for the 5 services that we increased to 8% on July 1st. And that we got 1 year money for, and then there's our usual $1.4 million in capital development, which is not gonna go any higher this year whatsoever. And on the far right column is the money we got from the budget system. $38 million is the dollar increase. $1.1 million is the genetics revenue generated from their $500,000 base, and then $500,000 for post-acute, and that nets to $718,000 expense. So after all saying that and talking about risk and variations, one of the things that we did, because we're ending 1.6 positive, but we started with 4 million cash and now we're at 1.6 million cash. So we're not doing anything special and we're down 2.4. That should be concerns of, hey, our model is leaking money. And there's a number of things that we can do about it this year. I think the way we have to look at the cost side, and we have to look at the revenue side. And I would argue there's room on both sides to be tighter. And whether we have thin cash margins or a $20 million cash margin, we should think that way every day. So it just makes it easier to think that way when you have to do it. And so I think that is a good, it gives us good motivation this year to move forward and just be as effective and efficient as we can be. The downside risk, we do have, the good news is that CPIP funds that were overloaded has at least a couple of years of capital money in it. And we're going to get $4 million of ICF funds that we should have no intention of using for operations. But we can't, we have to. So my recommendation is that as that money comes in, we use the CPIP funds, we put that money on the sidelines. So we have some fallback position if we have some downside risk. But at the end of the day, I think we'll be okay. And I think what we have to do this fall is once we get that first cost report, the key to the band system is precision. And not having cost reports makes us make too many estimates. And by getting that cost report, we'll be able to look at all our rates and see what has happened. And if we need to balance the books, we can adjust our rates up or down. And we're going to have to look, best example is respite. We got to look at how we do that. You just can't, you can't spend 120% of a cost. You need to think of another way to do it. And so that's what we got to put our thinking caps on, to adjust those rates and make sure that come December 1st, we have if we do everything we do now, but December 1st, we'll have a greater precision on what June 29 looks like or June 30th looks like. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions?
The spending plan is always a thing to me that, we've always hung our hat, well, it's in the spending plan, and you see how the spending plan is very general. And at some point in time, I like to look at the General Assembly approved budget and compare it to our spending plan with what we're actually going to do versus how it was approved, that it was given to us and what it's supposed to be spent on.
There are a lot of allocations that go from here to here.
Yeah.
And I think once we figure out the way forward for
Yeah, I know
payment
that's,
system,
we're not ready for that yet, but at some point. So
we need to make sure that we can have better visibility into the community contracts, which has you're drawing all the budget items into one bucket.
Yeah, so do you know offhand what the General Assembly approved for administrative costs for DDSN? As just a comparison, you know what I'm saying?
The way we work, the way the General Assembly works, especially for Medicaid agencies, is they approve a budget that is generally $16 million higher than we need, just to give us capacity to match in a best case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
So what they approve for us is not in our spending plan. It's a much higher number. And
It's in the Appropriations Act.
So is it a higher number in administrative costs?
An administrative budget, yes.
Because usually it's, not.
Well, what you'll see in the Appropriations Act is just the straight personnel and operating budget for administration. Fringe benefits is its own program, And when we do this here, we try to include that in the line item of administration.
So last year when we were looking at this, it jumped up over $1 million. I mean, it was like really a big jump. And I'm assuming that came from the waiver administration division creation.
When we reconciled last year to this year,
Yes.
I forgot to talk about it, I know it's late on here, but we did reconcile last year from this year, what's different? And that number came in right about what we're predicting with our what I'd say our overall, the way we forecast it this way, when you reconcile it, what's happening this year that whatever happened last year that's not happening this year, we're able to do all those adjustments, and we came out about the same. And last year's had an extra $1 million of administration. I think it was about 600 and some change was the waiver administration, and the other difference was the Alliance contract. They both combined went up over $1 million.
The waiver administration division and alliance. So this year we're,
That's still gonna happen this year too. That's not one of those factors that change. That's the same, so we're counting on that.
so yeah, it was a recurring cost that we committed to last year
Yes.
without really realizing it, some of us.
I don't think we crosswalked it to the exact offset. We assumed there was money in the system. And there
Yeah, I
was,
don't think we did either.
whatever it is, the precision of which we operate, because we're so close to zero, we can't do that.
Well, this is probably the best that we can do at this point
I
with
think it will get better.
clarification. I think, yeah, we will too. So I'd like to make a motion, we approve the spending plan as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
It does not look like we need to go into executive session, so our next regular meeting hopefully will be at the Coastal Center in Somerville on October 18th, 2018. This meeting is adjourned. Thanks for coming.
It's their 50th anniversary.